بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأولين والآخرين وآله وصحبه أجمعين. To speak of spiritual significance of Islamic architecture means that we're going to speak about spiritual significance on one hand and Islamic architecture on the other. The much debated question about whether there is an Islamic architecture, yes, definitely there is an Islamic architecture, because independently of time, place, building material, styles, and so on, there is a timeless element in Islamic architecture. The timeless element is precisely the spiritual significance. Now, to illustrate what we mean by spiritual significance, let us give a simple example. The simple prayer rug that you use at home. The prayer rug, there is usually an arch drawn on it. This arch is designed to represent the mihrab in the mosque, which designates the direction of Mecca to which you direct yourself during the prayer. Now, if inside this mihrab you hang a lamp, then you have a niche within which is the lamp, and that is a direct reference to the ayat an-nur, the verse of light in the Quran. And this is what we mean by spiritual significance, that there is a significance in a form that points at one of the higher meanings in the Quran and the Sunnah. It indicates something about Allah, His book, His messenger, or about paradise and the higher world. Another obvious example is the Islamic garden. In Persian they call it char bagh, char meaning four and bagh meaning garden. It's a fourfold garden divided into four quarters, in the middle of which there is a fountain, which is a clear reference to the description of paradise in Surah Al-Rahman in the Quran, where the paradise is divided into four paradises, in each of which is a fountain. And the designers usually designed Islamic gardens in this way, according to the instructions of kings and princes and so on, who explicitly requested this kind of design to remind them of Allah and paradise. A very important feature of Islamic art in general and Islamic architecture in particular is that it has to have three dimensions, and if one of these is missing, then it cannot be considered Islamic. The first dimension is obviously the utilitarian dimension. A building or anything has to be designed to facilitate the purpose for which it is built. The second is the aesthetic dimension, because Allah is beautiful and He likes everything to be beautiful, and everything in Islamic civilization had an obvious aesthetic dimension. Everything had to be beautiful. The third dimension, which is usually overlooked these days due to the deterioration that the Muslims have gone through within the last 2 centuries or so, is the spiritual significance. Now, if you enter a mosque, you will find a courtyard. In the middle of the courtyard, you will find an ablution fountain. Rather strange to have an ablution fountain in the middle of the courtyard, which becomes filled with people on Fridays, for instance. But the ablution fountain is usually designed in a certain manner to remind you of paradise. There is a fountain in the middle, surrounded by 8 pillars and surmounted by a dome. The 8 pillars, in Muslim terms, can refer but to one of two things: either the 8 gates of paradise or the carriers of the throne. And then the dome that is surmounting these 8 columns is a clear reference to the sky and to the throne of God. So that this ablution fountain is an image of paradise. You enter the mosque, you leave the world behind you, you orient yourself towards Allah, and He gives you the good news that this is what is waiting for you, that is paradise. Another very clear example of spiritual significance in architectural elements is the minaret. The minaret is something that shoots out from ground level to the sky. And anything, not just a minaret in a mosque, but anything that shoots from ground level to the sky is an indication of the Mi'raj, of the ascension of a human being from physical level to spiritual level. The perfect ascension is obviously that of the Prophet ﷺ, but each of us has his own ascension to make, has his own ladder to climb, and the minaret is an image of this ladder. It's usually made of 3 levels. The lowermost one usually a cubical, or the second one octagonal, and the third one cylindrical. The cubical level is an indication of the physical world. The octagonal level is an indication of the intermediary world, the subtle world of forms, and the cylindrical level is an indication of the spiritual world of lights. So we have 3 levels, and each of us, to ascend towards Allah, needs to cross from his physical level to his psychic level, which corresponds to the subtle level, which is the octagonal part of the minaret, and then the cylindrical level, which is the spiritual. And these are usually separated by balconies, 3 balconies, indicating Islam, Iman, Ihsan. Now, if you enter the minaret from its base, from the door at ground level, then you usually find that it is very dark. And then you start to ascend the staircase, and you find that at the first level you will get light from an indirect source. It will get a little lighter. Then you go up 1 more level and the light becomes stronger. When you get to the uppermost level, then there is lights everywhere. Now this is a very clear reference of what happens during the Mi'raj, during the ascension. You start by being a dense, dark slave of your appetites, and then you purify yourself as you are ascending, and the light in your heart increases and increases and increases until it fills the whole heart, as described in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this design of the staircase of inside the minaret is deliberate. It was done according to my architect friends. It was designed that way. The other thing is that when you stand at ground level, you can see as far as the next building. If you go to the first level, then you can see a little farther. If you go to the second level, you see beyond the buildings. If you go to the uppermost level, then you'll see all the way to the horizon, which is again precisely what happens during the spiritual ascension of a human being. His insight becomes more and more and more penetrating. It can penetrate time and space, and this is what happened with Rasulullah when he ascended through the 7 heavens, and he could see everything. He could see the human history from its beginning to its end, with all its details. You can see the whole geography of the universe of Allah. Because if you get to the tip of the spiritual ladder, then everything becomes very clear in front of your eyes, and this is again a clear indication that our ancestors knew precisely what they were doing when they were designing minarets and other elements of Islamic architecture.